Today's episode of the Chain Clankers Disc Golf Podcast features the top 5 mistakes you're making as a disc golfer and how to fix them. Let's get into it right now.
Hey, I'm Logan Harpool with Team Dynamic Discs, and you're listening to the Chain Clankers Podcast.
Welcome in, everybody, to the Chain Clankers Disc Golf Podcast, presented by Upper Park Disc Golf. You've heard us say it on every episode this year, but they truly do have some of the best, most high-quality disc golf bags on the marketplace right now. If you are looking to upgrade your bag or you're looking for a more durable disc golf bag that can hold more discs than what you currently have, you have to check out the Pinch Pro. This thing comes in at just under $100 using our code Clankers10. You can get over 30 discs in there. It is an awesome bag if you're a pro like our guest today, or if you're a new player. Again, promo code Clankers10 helps us, and you support Upper Park, which has supported us, so we highly appreciate them. Today, we have a fantastic guest with us, a local pro who has really made a name for himself on the Disc Golf Pro Tour. He was our first ever guest on the podcast. He gave us an opportunity to grow and get some other people on the podcast, and cannot be more thankful for Logan Harpool joining us again. He has a winning percentage near 30%, folks. That is an insane number to think about. Logan, how are we doing tonight?
I'm great. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, we are very excited. I know I have not chit-chatted with you outside of the 4 or 5 holes that we managed to snag with you on Friday at Camp Hawk in Newton. So can't wait to get this thing rolling, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no problem. It's funny, I ran into you guys and I told Louie, I was like, man, it's time for us to talk again. When I was on here the first time, we shut it down and we sat and talked for a while, and I said, the way you guys are doing things, you have no problem getting big names on here. And it was him and Horatio at the time, and I don't think you guys believe me, but you guys are stand-up guys, you do the right thing, and your intentions are in the right place, so it's no surprise you've been successful.
Yeah, definitely appreciate the kind words there. I know that I was calling BS in my head when you were saying that. I was like, hey, maybe we'll see what happens. And it's incredible to see what's transpired over the last 2 years. So super excited to get into this episode. I think this is going to help a lot of disc golfers who are struggling and making basic mistakes that are holding their game back. But before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about you. And before that, I also want to discuss, what do you think is your favorite course in the Wichita area? I mean, that was the first time that we played Camp Hawk when we ran into each other the other day, and I gotta say, that was a very fun course to play. I feel like it's got a lot of good qualities that Colwich has, but some other challenges that make it more fun than that course. How would you kind of rank those courses? Is that, like, especially with you, how, your skill level, your rating, is that kind of the course that you're going to be drawn to more to kind of get more aspects of what it's like on the Pro Tour?
Yeah, in terms of preparing for the next level, that's a good one. I think it's one of the best ones we have for sure. One thing I take into consideration is length. I like longer courses, not necessarily wide open, but when you get on tour, you don't have the gimme straight 280, nothing in the way. So yeah, the new Camp Hawk layout is legit. It's fun. They're improving it day after day too. They're cleaning it up. I hope they don't clean it up too much, because that's what makes it fun right now, but it's fair. There's no trees where you're supposed to throw it, and if you don't throw it where you're supposed to, you're kind of screwed. So I like it a lot. Aside from that, I'm partial to clap because it lets you let it fly. The length is there, and there's so many layouts out there that if you want the wooded one, you can play the wooded one. If you want the long bomber one, you can play that one. So in terms of what I'm looking for to prepare, those are the two that I'm going to stick to. But yeah, Camp Hawk, at the rate they're improving that place, I don't really know what more they can do, but it's awesome, and it's close to home for me, so I don't mind the drive either.
Yeah, I definitely had a great time. Like Q said, that was the first time we had either one of us had been out there to play it, and definitely we played the Red 18, I believe is what it's called, the new red layout or whatever. It was a great time. I mean, there's a little bit of elevation change for everyone that's not from around here, which is a lot different than a lot of the courses in Kansas. And then, like you said, some big bomber holes with a few fairways with a few trees in the fairway, but they are definitely fairways. So it's a good time. I couldn't agree more. I just need to be able to throw it a little further, and I'll have a lot more fun, I think.
That's fair. I think a lot of disc golfers feel that as well. One more question on it. I know I've seen you plenty of times out at I'm going to butcher that. I think it's called Hat McLean, the Park City course. Is that just, close, easy, especially in the wintertime, you can knock that out, or are there a couple holes out there that you're trying to simulate something that's on the Pro Tour?
Yeah, I have some of my own layouts I play out there. I've never played it backwards because it's pretty busy. There's a lot of people walking, but I like to skip a hole, so I play 1 to 2's basket, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, and so on. Later on, you have to switch it up, but everything's a par 4, and you just get creative, and if it's too wide open, you pick a landing zone and you say, I have to throw it here, or put a little extra pressure on yourself. But I play Hap because it is closest to home for me, and it's never busy. So I can kind of do what I want. I can play those extra layouts and not worry about getting in anybody's way. And I pretty much know everyone that plays there too. It doesn't get visited very often, so you're kind of seeing your buddies every time you're there if they are there. But for the most part, I can't tell you how many times I've been the only car in that parking lot.
Yeah, that'd be awesome to throw a little bit alternate layout. I have a good time on the last like 7 holes, but those are a little bit shorter, so makes sense. But I do have one question, because out of all the courses in town, I'm not knocking the baskets at all, but they are they're not the best or the most premier. Do you think practicing on baskets that aren't quite? I mean, I like to think they don't catch that great. Granted, I'm amateur, but I think they catch just fine. They just don't catch as well as some. Is there something to be said about maybe playing on the baskets that aren't as fancy or don't have as many chains as some of the others?
Yeah, those are, I don't want to say the name because I don't want to sling mud on a podcast, but they have sliding chains. I don't know if you've noticed that, so they move. So if you ever play a tournament there and you're looking at, like, I don't know if the video version people watch, but there are gaps where you can see an inch right and an inch left of the pole. If the chains aren't where they're supposed to be, you can actually walk up and move the chain about 3 inches over to cover the pole. Okay. So they're not the greatest, but they're certainly not the worst. Yeah. And I think we might hit on this later, but you have to change your putt. You have to adapt your putt for the baskets you're playing on, and the best players in the world already do that. Me being a nose-up spin putter, I have to make sure to get the nose up or the nose down, because if I go in flat, I'm going to hit the pole on any basket and come right back out. So I probably change it a little bit, but I'm also, when I'm there, I'm practicing, so I'm trying to have a right-to-left putt and a left-to-right putt, and I don't putt everything the same way every time. In a tournament, if I can, that's great, but I want to have the most versatile putt I possibly can, so I'm changing it as much as I can. But those baskets, they're okay. They're, like I said, they're not the greatest. I don't think they're approved for A tiers. So if that tells you anything, I don't know. The sliding chains are a little weird.
Yeah, I didn't notice that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. And for us, we have started to go there more to record, kind of with what you said earlier, was there's not going to be as many people there. And we just got Horatio back on the team. He's going to be doing a lot more of our YouTube content. And the day we went out to record, I think everybody and their mother got an invite to show up because the parking lot was literally full. There was no league. Nothing was going on. It was a ton of families. I mean, you had kids galore out there actually playing disc golf. And a part of me was like, shoot, we are going to be waiting a long time to do what we need to do. But the other part of me was so excited because that would not have happened 5 years ago. And the acceleration and the growth of this sport and families getting into it, I think, is going to be key for the overall success of the sport. But I want to talk a little bit about you and your career now. The last time we had spoke, you said that getting on the tour, playing pro tour events is something you want to do, but that's not going to consume your life. You're not going to be somebody who's on the tour every single stop, every single weekend. You've got a job here. You've got a life here. Is that still kind of what's going on with you, or are we looking at a bigger tour schedule this year?
Definitely a bigger schedule, but I'm not changing the things that I hold most important to me. And disc golf is important. I want to pursue it, and I want to absolutely send it. I've told the people closest to me, I may not be here for a long time, so I might as well have a good time. So I'm going for everything I can within reason. I'm going to play Waco, Open at Austin, Jonesboro, and then as far as the summer, everything from Portland to Ledgestone except for Europe. And instead of Europe, I'm going to Alaska for the Alaska State Championship. So I'm doing as much as I can while still teaching. So I don't want to back away from that. I could and probably be comfortable, but I think most people don't understand. Like, it seems like the dream job, and for a lot of people it is, but life on the road touring is hard, and if you're not cut out for it, it's not for you. And I have no shame in saying it's not for me full time. I love doing it for 3.5 months out of the year, and considering that's the only time I'm out there and I still qualified for a tour card, it does kind of make you wonder what happens if I dedicated everything. But I've talked to some of my closest friends on tour, and they even told me, to back away from what you have, you'd be kind of crazy at 28 to leave your security and your salary, your insurance, your benefits, and all that, and life gets in the way. And I'm fortunate to be 28 and not have a lot of the real responsibilities, not married, no kids, so I can still do adult things and still chase the dream while I can, and that won't last forever, so I'm going to enjoy it while I can.
Yeah, that is awesome. I'm a little bit jealous. It'd be fun to be able to get out there and sling. Like you said, I probably wouldn't be cut out for the tour, but that would be amazing. But I do have one question. What is one tournament you are the most excited about in your lineup for this season?
I'm always excited to get back to the Preserve. I've always played well there. Last year I was one of the worst putters in the field, and I still finished inside, I think I was 26th, right around top 25. And I was like 101st in the field in putting. Just couldn't connect, but I was throwing the disc better than a lot of people. So I'm excited to get back there and relax. And I think that's the main thing I can do this year is relax, because now I have not all the experience, but I feel like I have enough. I've failed in front of thousands. I've succeeded in front of thousands. So I just feel super calm, and I haven't felt like this going into a season before, where I'm like, I know how to do it now. I know what I need to do. Whether I do it or not, I don't know, but I know how to. So Alaska, definitely excited for Alaska. I've heard great things about Meyer Lake and just being there. It's a bucket list trip. Excited to get back to Portland. I missed the cut there last year, had the worst tournament of my career, so there's no reason I don't play well on those courses. I know exactly what went wrong. It was all in my head, so I'm excited for a little redemption. And then it's tough to say. All those tour courses are super fun, and that's kind of how I set my schedule now. I'll go wherever the tour is going to go during the summer when I can, because that's the only time I can. But if a tournament doesn't excite me and I'm not going to have fun, I'm probably not going to go. So I'm looking forward to everywhere, but the Preserve in Alaska for sure.
I think that's a really good way of looking at it, especially because, you can still get into majors. You play good at a couple of tournaments. You qualify for USDGC. Of course, you're going to be playing Worlds. I can't exactly think in my head the timeline for Champions Cup, but maybe that's a possibility. And, I mean, heck, if you play good enough at the events, you can still get into the Tour Championship at the end of the year. So I also feel as though you get a little bit of an advantage by not being on such a grind for 9 months out of the year, that you almost get to come into these tournaments more fresh and the ability to go hard for this spurt of time and really give it your all, instead of being like, well, there's always, the next tournament or something like that. Like, you're going for everything right now. So I think that has an advantage, and I'm really excited to watch you and see on coverage this year. In Alaska, man, I've been talking to Trenton about this for so many months now that I want to go to Alaska and I want to play that course designed by Eric McCabe there. So I know I'm going to have to talk to you after the Alaska trip. That is going to be a ton of fun for sure. But what would you say is your biggest goal for 2023? When a year from now and you're looking back at what transpired in 2023, how would you define this year as a success?
My biggest downfall in the past has been consistency. So that's the number one thing that I want to improve on, is week in and week out staying inside that top 25. I do believe I have what it takes to win. Brian Earhart on the Disc Golf Network documentary mentioned that if you want to have a 40-hour work week and win a pro tour, it's an anomaly. And I agree, because it hasn't really been done yet in the modern era of disc golf. Back in the day, everybody had jobs and were weekend warriors on tour, but you don't see that anymore. So obviously I want to win. I think the Dynamic Disc Open was a lot closer than the final score indicated. There were a couple, I can find 2 shots that if I did those 2 shots differently, I put a lot of pressure on Rick. I was in solo second for a lot of that final round. And so I was that close, and I know what it took to get there. I know the headspace I was in. So I know I can win, but beating those guys is, you got to be on top of your game. So I want to hang around that top 25 and push higher and remain there and not have missed cuts and not have the 50th place finish and stuff. So if I'm able to do that, I'll be happy. I know that winning is tough to do, but I'm not going to show up to an event I don't believe I can win, and I mean that. It's not the way I'm wired. I think I fell into that as a rookie and in my second year on tour, just kind of being happy to be there, but those days are done. I'm not going to go if I don't believe I can win.
Yeah, sometimes you gotta let the dog in you out, like Q likes to say. The dog, you gotta let that dog out and let him.
You gotta let that dog in you. Yes, sir.
You gotta let him
well,
get out
hey,
there.
I
And
think
have
that's
some
some awesome stuff, man. I'm looking forward to it. Let's get into the educational part of today's episode. So we want to talk about 5 mistakes disc golfers are doing, problems that disc golfers are having, and we'll kind of maybe count down from 5 to 1, and Logan will give his things that he sees that disc golfers are doing incorrectly, and we'll kind of talk about how we can fix that and help you become a better disc golfer. So, Logan, why don't you start us off? What is number 5 on the list?
All right, starting with number 5, people are throwing the wrong discs. They are throwing what they see people throwing. They're throwing what they think is cool, and they're not throwing what works for them. And I don't know how many times I see people wrenching on overstable 13, 14 speed drivers in Kansas, and there's no wind. You just don't need them if there's no wind. So people are throwing the wrong stuff, not necessarily in terms of manufacturer, but just the stuff that doesn't work for them.
Yeah, we've definitely hit on that quite a bit. I do have one follow-up. So what would you recommend? So say someone out there is grabbing that 13, 14 speed like you talk about, and maybe they think they throw it good 1 out of 8 times, so they keep grabbing it. What would you recommend in, I don't know, say it's like a 300-foot hole and they are grabbing some 13 speed, crazy speedy, crazy fast. What would you recommend instead of grabbing that high speed overstable disc?
I think our starter pack is great. The plastic only lasts you so long if you're wanting to play better, but the Escape, the Truth, and the Judge are in there. The Escape, I think anybody can throw. It's a driver that has a little bit of speed, but it's a neutral flyer. So I would recommend that speed range. I'm terrible with flight numbers. I should be better. There are discs, but I think it's an 8 or a 9, right around in that range. So Escape, Explorer, something a little slower and neutral flying. When you know what you're doing and you understand how distance is achieved, it doesn't matter the disc you throw. You can pump anything out there.
I think that's a really good comment that you just made of if you understand how the disc works, it doesn't matter what the distance is, you can make the disc work for you. I think that's something that I know I've been working on a lot this year is going more to mids and putters. There's an infamous moment on this podcast where I said that mids are fake and you don't need to throw mid ranges, and I regret that every time Horatio tells me about it because I'm trying to be the champion of no, you should actually use your mid ranges, especially because you'll have a lot less side to side movement and you're going to be able to hit your lines more. Like that's today when we're recording this on Thursday, that's what the Instagram reel was about, right? And so I guess to follow up on that, one more question before we move to the next point. Is there a distance marker for you in your head of like, hey, I can throw this Explorer or this Escape 350 feet, but I can't really get to 360, 375? Is that maybe when it's time to bump up to something like a Raider or a Trespass or something of a higher speed nature? Or is it maybe more of a, well, you can get more out of that, you just have to go back and work on your form? Like, is there a key moment where you should start throwing those higher speed discs?
Yeah, I play a lot of regular golf too, and you have to know your club distances, and my pitching wedge flies to 120, and then my 9-iron pushes to 130, 135, and my 8 and so on. And by the time you get to a 4-iron, you're a little over 200, 210, 215, something like that. So I think your discs are the same way when it comes to competition. Obviously, when you're goofing around, you can throw a putter pretty far if the conditions are right. But if there's no wind, wind is the number one thing. And living in Kansas, we're probably more cognizant of it than others. But you need the fast stuff if you're going to fight wind. You don't want to rip an Explorer into a headwind unless you're just super crafty. But understanding how far they go, I'll never try to throw an Evader over 415. And if there's no wind, flat ground, like what comes to mind, hole 7 at the preserve. It's over water, super scenic. It's right before the massive par 5. If there's wind, I throw an Enforcer. If not, I've thrown an EMAC Truth, and it's like 405 feet, I think. It's pretty far. But the conditions of that hole dictate it. I mean, you can go straight at it with a mid or with that fairway driver, but yes, when we get to the next hole, the big par 5, I would never throw an Explorer off that tee. I'm going to try to bite off as much as I can because I'm going max distance, so I'm going to go Ballista Pro, put it high in the air, and let it work. So yeah, I think there is, like I said, you can make any disc go far, but should you? Probably not. So understanding that your bag sets up a lot like golf clubs, that can help you a lot.
Just another field work shout, or if you can't get to the field, make sure you're paying attention to how far they're going when you're out on the course, and it'll make a huge difference when you're out there playing everybody. It'll change your game.
Yeah, that's a good shout. Okay, Logan, what's number 4 on the list?
Number 4, I broke it down into 2 things. One specific, people throw nose up all the time and they don't realize it, and it's linked to bad form. And so what happens when you throw nose up, discs react to how much air is hitting the front of them when they're flying, just like an airplane. That's why airplanes take off into headwinds, because they have more resistance. It helps them get up. So if you throw nose up, your driver that's supposed to be a little sleeker actually takes on the profile of a mid. There's more of the disc getting air against the front of it, so it's going to be forced up. It's not going to fly the way it wants to. So if you're going to make discs fly the way they're supposed to, you have to utilize the profile and keep them flat.
As someone who admittedly struggles with nose up and nose angles, what was the aha moment that eventually, like when you finally got the disc, because we all know eventually, at first you weren't always throwing just bombs, you were throwing a little nose up. What was the aha moment that could kind of help us people that are trying to figure this out kind of get that down? I know it's not going to be right away, but what was something that really helped with that?
Well, for me to get distance, I don't have I've kind of developed a big turning full flight shot, but most of my shots are what people call golf shots, low line, no more than 10 foot high off the ground, and a missile. So that's what I settled into. And I think honestly, I've mentioned this 3 times already, it comes from living in Kansas, and I have to fight the wind. And the higher the disc gets, the more the wind can control it before it gets to the ground. So it can get pushed, turned, flipped, vectored, all that stuff. Get weird bounces. But if I keep it about 10 feet off the ground, not only does it have no choice but to continue forward rather than dump and fade side to side, it's going to continue to push forward, but I could avoid the wind. I could stay under what I couldn't see up above us, because I'm no meteorologist, but the wind does some weird stuff here. So what you feel on the tee pad is not always what's in the fairway. So in keeping it lower, I just felt I had more control. I don't necessarily remember one instance where I was like, oh, I have to keep it flat now. It was just, you hear about throwing nose up, nose down. And once I heard it explained to me why throwing nose up, the number one complaint is my mids, my fairways, and my distance driver all go the same distance. Why? Because you're throwing your mids flat, and then you try to muscle your drivers, and in throwing them nose up, they now act like a mid-range because there's more of the disc feeling the wind.
So to keep the disc flat, how should you position your body? I guess this kind of is 2 parts. First one, when you have the disc and you are getting ready to go through your reach back, should you be holding, I'm going to try to face it as if I was driving toward the wall here. Should you have your disc in a nose, hyzer position in your hand during your reach back? Should it be flat, or should it be in an anhyzer? And so, is there a hand position that you should have the disc in, as well as is your body the part that controls your release angle, or is it how you have your wrist during the reach back, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it does. I don't think it's so much the wrist, because I asked Danny Lindahl this. I sent him a bunch of screenshots of pros, and I said, why do these pros reach back on anhyzer so much? And I've started to, I don't know why, I don't try to. I've started to reach back on anhyzer, and a lot of the big throwers reach back on anhyzer. So I don't think that's necessarily important, but I think the level you reach back is. And if you're able to keep it on plane to where it's moving through flat, And do as I say, not as I do, because I actually have a high reach back that tips before it comes through. My reach back is early, just ever so slightly, so I have a weird lean and then it comes through. But I've heard Eric McCabe say, pretend that your disc is a tray of drinks and you don't want to spill them. So you're going to keep it level, and I don't know how well you guys can see, but if your arm is able to stay at a 30 degree and go straight forward and straight back and straight forward, the disc will come out flat. But if you're doing this weird stuff up and down, that's where you're going to have nose angle issues.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
So
go ahead,
sorry, I was just going to summarize that. So if I'm hearing you correctly, it's not necessarily about how you are holding the disc. It's more about the arm plane that your reach back is, and you want to make that consistent. And if you want to throw an anhyzer, maybe you have a higher reach back. If you want to throw a hyzer, maybe you have a lower one. But if you want to throw flat, it just needs to be straight parallel, right?
I think so. Don't quote me on that, and certainly don't watch me because I'm not the best at it. But if you watch guys like Simon and Gannon, big throwers that are very smooth, their reach backs are pretty low, and the disc is pretty much coming straight through. Then if they're going to throw higher in the air, it might change a little bit. But I would encourage listeners to focus more on a flat reach and pull rather than the wrist game. The wrist game you can tinker with later, but when you see these reach backs coming up and dropping down, or like me, the reach back is actually good, but then my front foot has to get down and then I tilt. And there's that little lean. So it's gotten better. It's still not perfect, but I think that's a better cue and it's easier to do than have your wrist perfect because there's a small margin for error with messing with your wrist.
Earlier, you were talking about how you want to keep the disc closer to the ground. You don't want to throw it super high up because the wind can do a ton of crazy things to it, right? And I completely agree. And it's funny, I'm taking some of the guys I work with out to the course. I took them out for the first time last Saturday. I'm trying to get them to go again this Saturday, trying to get them caught by the little disc golf bug there. And they were talking to me the other day, and they're like, well, why didn't we go on Sunday when it wasn't windy? First off, I was going to Camp Lock with Tristan. Second off, I knew they were going to hate that course. Third, I think it's important to get exposure in the wind because especially if you're in Kansas or if you're in the Midwest, right? You play disc golf in the wind. When there is not wind, that's when it's abnormal. We don't have the luxury of not playing in the wind. So where I'm going with this is, what is a good distance off the ground marker? Should it be, chest high? That's really about where you want your disc to be off the ground. Should it be waist high, shin high? Like for you, what is a good distance marker height-wise that the disc should be off the ground?
On a non-windy day, I'm really not good at estimating distances. That's why I carry a rangefinder. I'm terrible at eyeballing distances. But I let it get a little bit higher, but still not as high as some of the other pros can put it. I would say 20 to 25 feet in the air, and that's pretty high. I wouldn't encourage everybody to try to throw low-line missiles like I do, but I think it's a good place to start because it forces you to drive the disc forward rather than anything else. And keeping the disc flat is so important. And that's what you want to learn first before you start throwing big, high flex shots. And yeah, I'll put it a little bit higher, but my default setting is to throw low and driven, probably 15 to 20 feet tops. And I don't really get too squirrely outside of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, what is the third mistake disc golfers are making?
The third one, and this is what we mentioned earlier that I said we'd come back to. People practice one putt on one angle, and they think that that's going to make them successful, and it will help. But if you putt inside, and I putt inside all winter long, but if you practice one putt that's on hyzer that drops, what do you do when it's a right to left wind? What do you do when it's a hard left to right? You have to be able to manipulate your putt, and that's what the best guys in the sport are so good at. Paul, Rick, Eagle, the best putters in the game, they don't putt it the same way every time. And I'm convinced over the course of our career, we may never have the exact same putt 2 times because there's a little breeze or there's a little elevation or the basket's different and you have to use a different nose angle to get it to catch. So people that putt one way all the time and they play in no wind, What happens when it's breezy on tournament day and you can't manipulate your putt and your body is unfamiliar with putting on an anhyzer or putting one a little higher and letting it drop?
So for the guy out there who does take 15 putters and stand in the same spot and putt the same exact way, what kind of drill would you recommend for them to kind of work on these different angles and have that different exposure to different wind and all the above that you just mentioned?
Well, you still want to do what you're doing. And I tell people you still want to put up at least 100 a day dead on, because there's nothing more frustrating than no wind and you miss 20 footers. That should never happen. If there's no wind, you can use your putt. You can putt it however you want. But we hardly ever play in no wind at all. So I say just force yourself, like Q was talking about. Get out when it's windy and circle around the basket. And when you know the wind is out of the north, putt from the east, putt from the west, putt from the south. Get all those different wind reads, and it's not something you can do if you play in a group. That's why you have to go out and work on your own. So the putting down the hallway is great. You still need to do it. Like I said, you don't want to miss the wide open 20-footer with no wind. And having that one putt, like your putt, is important, but also learn to manipulate that putt.
Perfect.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Something I would add to that for me personally that I have seen help is I will go from doing putting, staggered to then going out wide, or, just changing my feet so that way if I do have to step around a tree or something like that, it feels a lot more normal. Is that something that you should, incorporate more into your putting routine? Should you be trying to get the same amount of reps from each of the two main ways of putting, or should you, 75% of your time on your normal stuff, 25% on the oddball stuff? What's a good time allocation?
I don't know in terms of time allocation, but it is important to get on a knee and practice those, and not only to do it in your hallway, but to do it outside too, because then you're going to have wind reads. And I know for me, I putt down my hallway, so I literally have tunnel vision when I putt, and there's no distractions, no other option than to putt it dead straight. So when I go outside, I actually still imagine my hallway, and it helps me. But it's important to get outside to where you see the distractions and you see leaves blowing and you don't have that tunnel vision. But yeah, get on a knee every scenario, because I guarantee everybody's going to get into a tournament, and it happened to me multiple times, and you have a shot that you're like, I've never done this. I think I know how to do it, but I've never tried it. And that's why I chose my putting style, because my putting style has evolved quite a bit. It's always been a nose up spin putt, but I used to drop it real low and then bring it up and go. And this year I kind of just brought it down a little bit below my belt and went. And now this year I literally just go from my belt buckle straight at the basket. And it's like I'm just playing catch. So when I go to a knee, it's no different. When I straddle, it's no different. I get to use the same stroke. The only difference is my legs are taken in and out. So guys that are more leg dominant, or someone like a Gannon, when Gannon has to go to a knee, his swing is a little different. Now he's tall enough and long enough that he gets away with a lot of that, and he works extremely hard, not to take anything away from him. But if you have a more unique putt like that, you really need to put yourself in a lot more situations to master it.
Yeah, that's all fantastic advice. And I know for myself, I've been working on straddle a little bit more, because I find myself doing it more than I seemed to before, and it's been a game changer. I've actually had to do the same thing, Logan. I used to when I first started, I did this crazy like Paige Pierce type thing, because that's what Paige did, and she was good. And then now I've kind of just have a spot locked in, take it to my belt buckle, and then go straight through and try not to think about it too much. And it's paid dividends. But that's some good stuff. Get out there and practice all your putts, people. So what do you got for us on number 2?
A quick story real quick. It's kind of funny. I practiced with Clint Calvin for the Dynamic Disc Open, and when we got done at Country Club, I stood up the hill for a death putt on 18, because it's the elevated basket on a downslope. And I said, I don't know what it is, but I feel like I'm going to have this putt. And so I stood there and I putted that death putt. I went like 1 for 20. And I finally made the last one. I was like, whatever, Clint, hopefully I don't have that putt. Final round to finish on the podium, I had that putt. And I made it, and which was huge, because if I missed that, I would have taken, if I went OB, it was probably outside the top 10. If it hits and sits, I take 7th, and I finished 3rd. And so that night, Clint messaged me. He was like, you got to be kidding me. That was the exact same putt. So when you play those practice rounds too, it's important to, I might land here, even though this putt is no fun at all. I'm going to practice this putt. So yeah, I was confident in the moment, but honestly throwing those up shots and stuff in the rounds prior, I was like, don't leave it up the hill because you were 1 for 20 in practice, dude. I don't like those odds. So yeah, old Clint will know what I'm talking about if he listens to this. It was a heck of a time.
Hey, you might have missed all but one, but since you had practiced it a little bit, you had to feel much better than if you would have just had to do it without any of that. So
tunnel vision.
Exactly.
Thousands of people watching, cameras in your face. Like, you got no option, dude. You got to send it.
It was awesome.
Go for it.
I was there.
So number 2, people are playing. They're not working. There's a difference. Playing rounds, you use the word play because you're playing rounds. You say field work because you're working. You get better by working.
I love it.
I mean, I agree with this a lot. I think it's one of those things where if you only play rounds, you don't do any field work, you don't do any extra practice putting, I don't think you can have the expectation that you are going to see massive ratings jumps, or if you're not playing in tournaments, you're going to see yourself get better at the same course that you go to every time. Because I also think, and I know this happens to me all the time, it's, let's say, what's a good example? Hole 13 at Oak. I'm going to throw the exact same disc every single time because that's what I throw on hole 13 at Oak. I'm not working on my shot selection. I'm not working on learning something else. I just have this one disc in my bag for this one shot on this one course. That does not make you a well-rounded disc golfer. So that leads me to ask, how can you become a more well-rounded disc golfer? What are some drills that people can do in the field that will make them improve their game?
Yeah, you got to be careful because we're just now getting into, or I say just now, at least now that I'm paying attention, more and more disc golfers are getting hurt. And I think it's important to have yourself on a pitch count like pitchers in baseball because disc golf is hard on your body, and especially if you're throwing a lot of forehands, your arm is taking some serious abuse. But I think you should go to the field. You should take your bag. The fieldwork bags are great, but there's no substitute for getting to know the discs you're actually throwing. Throw everything straight and flat. Throw everything on Annie, throw everything on hyzer, go out and throw them back. If you do your whole bag 3 ways, you have 20 discs 3 ways, 60 throws, that's a round. That's a round on a very long course, and that's almost your pitch count. 60 hard, because people are probably going to throw them kind of hard too. That's a lot, and it doesn't take you that long. You'll be surprised, but that's how you get to know your stuff. Then you'll realize, oh, I'm kind of bad at throwing my Bard on an Anheuser for some reason. Okay, give me a stack of Bards. Let's go get better at that so it's not a weakness. And I've had people ask me, like, why don't you come to more leagues? And why don't, well, number one, because I'm on the road a lot. I'm not here a lot. And 2, if I'm going to throw, I want to be getting better. And me personally, I don't feel like I develop or improve skill in a round. I don't know about other people. If you struggle with nerves and pressure, go play the leagues. But for me, if I'm working, number one, I don't tend to enjoy having a ton of people around me because then I feel like I slow them down and I'm not going to be the guy that puts 5 on every basket because that's just annoying. So I try to do it more on my own, but taking your stuff to a field, throw it all one way, throw it all another, throw it all another. And you'll also learn like, okay, that disc doesn't like that flight, so I'm never going to use it for that. Instead, I'm going to use this disc.
Yeah, that's some awesome stuff, especially for learning your bag and all of that. So what I do have one question. What are your thoughts for the people who aren't able to get out and like you said, a round isn't always the best spot to learn, but for the people who can't get to the field, what are your thoughts on throwing into a net?
I think it's good. I think you want to video it. You can't just go on field because a lot of things are going to feel really good. You see professional golfers all the time in the range or on the range, they lay down a stick to make sure their feet are truly straight because even the best golfers in the world, what feels like they're lined up straight isn't always straight. So throwing into a net is great. It's great for your body. It's great to develop that repetition and to improve your form for when you can get outside. In terms of learning what your discs do, not great. But in terms of developing solid habits or breaking bad habits, I think it's a good thing.
And then you saw me throw in standstill because I decided before that round I was going to throw a whole round standstill. what are your thoughts? And we've kind of recommended that for new players, at least at first. What are your thoughts on standstill? And just high level, what are your thoughts on doing the standstill early on?
I think it's fine. I think there's a lot of benefit to it. It keeps you compact. It keeps you from trying to throw too far because for a lot of people, it's impossible to throw far on a standstill. I think the one downside is that your timing isn't developing, and timing is one of the most important things. But I don't think you guys are wrong in recommending that to new players because it removes a lot of variables. It removes poor timing. It removes nasty footwork. And it lets you feel the path of the disc and what the release point likely should be. So I think that's a good starting point, especially I've never done that, but you're going to be in situations. I remember back when it was the Glass Blown Open, I was on a card with Cole Redolin and a couple other guys that are still on tour, and Cole was just starting out on tour. I was brand new. So it's kind of funny that we didn't know who any of us were, but now we're touring together. But Cole on 18 at the country club was in mud, and the hyzer up around the tree that we play now, he threw that standstill from the mud.
Wow.
Which is a smash. And I asked him, I was like, dude, how in the world did you do that? Because Cole wasn't built like he is now. He was wiry, skinny, he was smaller. And he said, I practiced it. That's nothing new. I practiced that standstill. I'm like, well, guess we better start practicing standstills because that was incredible.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, here it is. Number one. What is the number one mistake that disc golfers are making and how to avoid it?
The number one mistake is there are a lot of prideful people who think they know everything. And I know that's unpopular to say, but I did form reviews this off season. And let me just say, I don't know nearly as much as the top guys in the game. I know enough. I know enough to give advice on certain things, but I still have so much to learn. But the pride is a hindrance to people's progress because they tell themselves they're throwing 500 feet when they're not. And they tell themselves they shot 14 down when they really had 5-foot faults, 2 out of bounds, and they took 5 mulligans. You got to be honest with yourself and tell yourself the truth. And when you play a bad round, if you're not willing to own why that round went bad, you're never going to improve. And I hope this doesn't come across as calling people out, but we all know somebody who says, I throw 550. And I did those form reviews this off season. We ended up getting like 90 emails with people sending videos. I'm still working on them. I got so many. And one of them, a young man sent one in and said, I throw 560. I can't seem to throw further. Can you help me? And in the most polite way I could say, I said, here's what you can do to move better. But looking at your form, I have a hard time believing that's happening. And I didn't mean it rude. It's like, man, unless you're just muscling and you caught a tailwind, I don't see it. So I encouraged him. I said, please be honest with yourself. Walk off 400, walk off 450, and see if you're really throwing that far. Because I do think it's a hindrance, and I think pride stops a lot of people because they won't listen. And I am always asking questions. Shoot, when I play with Paul or Rick, I'm asking questions during the round. Not so much that final round, but I want to learn from them. These guys know, they've been there, they've done it. But if you think you know everything, you're no longer a student of the game, and you're going to plateau pretty quick.
Yeah, that's some good advice there, and it's hard for a lot of people to do. A lot of people are, I mean, I suffered from it sometimes, thinking I'm gonna make every putt, which you kind of have to have that, right? You have to trust yourself and believe in yourself. But yeah, it's definitely interesting when you got the people out there that just think they're hands above others, and then you watch them throw, and I don't know, it's more power to them. But I agree, just take the salt every once in a while. Take the bad news and kind of take a step back and think about your game. And I think it'll, like you said, it'll pay dividends, and you'll learn a lot and play much better. So
everybody can teach you something, whether you're watching Paul and Simon or whether you're behind an MA 50 card at a tournament. You know, some of those guys can ball, and all those guys have at least one thing that they're really good at, and you can pick up stuff. So if I am playing casual rounds with people or practice rounds, if I'm playing with When I'm out there, I like to play with Alden and Gannon and those guys, or sometimes I hop in with some teammates and play with Clemens. And I'm always asking questions because that's how you learn. But I think pride stops a lot of people in that they honestly believe that they're shooting 15, 16 under. Maybe they are, but it's a practice round. Anybody can do that in a practice round. What are you doing when the pressure's on? And I know I've had rounds where I thought, man, that was really good. And then I go back on the ride home and I think back, I'm like, well, I threw 2 drives on that hole, so that one doesn't really count. And it was my second putt that went in, and I blamed it on I wasn't, my feet weren't set. Those count. And there's no legitimacy to that round if you're throwing multiple and playing your second. So I don't know. An unpopular answer. I don't mean to call anyone out, but you got to be humble. You're never going to know everything.
No, I think people need to be called out. I need to be called out. I will never sit here and be like, yeah, I'm the guy who can throw 500. Ask me if I can throw 350 consistent. I'll probably tell you no every single time. Ask me if I can throw 300 consistent. I'll still probably tell you no. But definitely I have had my fair share of putts where I'm like, well, I wasn't really trying the first one. The second one I was actually trying on. And so it's okay. Like I've done this to you before, Trenton, where I'll be like, hey, if this goes in, ball doesn't lie. It was good. So, but I also think something that's very important about this is something that I know, practice rounds, right? When the very first tournament that I ever did, I did like 3 or 4 practice rounds beforehand, and I was doing those exact things. Oh, well, I'm not going to have that bad of a drive. Let me just throw one more, because that's not going to happen in the tournament, right? Oh, well, let me just make one more putt. If you're not putting any pressure on yourself and you're not holding yourself accountable, what happens in the tournament when you do have that bad drive, when you do have that bad putt, and then you just put yourself in a horrible mental space that you're unable to recover from? I've done it. Trenton, you've done it. Logan, you've done it. Every single one of us has done it before. So I really like that final one, that you need to be honest with yourself. You need to be humble, and it's okay that you don't throw 500 feet. 90% of disc golfers do not throw 500 feet, and that is okay. It's okay that you don't make 100 out of 100 30-footers. 90% of disc golfers cannot do that. That is okay. But something I think that is important, and that will kind of what Logan was saying, always be an active learner. You can learn something from everyone. If you subscribe to the podcast right now, if you're new listening to the show, you're going to get those tips not only from Trenton and I, but pros like Logan and other pros that come on the show. Even if they're not pros, even if they're an amateur like us, everyone has something that they're good at and that they can share and that you can pick up on and learn. That's kind of what makes our show different and can allow you to become a better disc golfer. One question I have for you on this topic, Logan, is what are the kinds of questions that you're asking the likes of Paul, Ricky, Gannon, even Simon, Chris Clemens, when you're playing these rounds with these other pros and you're saying that you're constantly asking them questions, what are your questions to them?
Most of the time it's shot selection or shot shape. Hey, why did you choose that? Is it just because you're comfortable, or do you see something I don't? I really like practicing with Chris because he's a southpaw, so he sees things different. And so when he's throwing a forehand, I'm throwing a backhand. When he throws backhand, I'm throwing forehand. And I like to play with people who see the course different. I see what I want to see, and most people are the same way. When they step up to a hole, I see the shot that I want to throw. That doesn't mean it's the best option, and a lot of that comes from experience. Gannon, there's a 10-year age gap between us, and Gannon has more experience on the course than me, so he sees things a whole lot different. So I do ask about mechanics. Why do you hold it the way you do? Is there a reason you ran up that way on that shot? Obviously, during rounds, not so much, but when I've played with Paul, it's during round 1 of tournaments, so it's not super tense, and you have to know when and when not to, because there is a bad time to ask questions. But I have relationships with those guys too. Those are my friends. I'm definitely closer to Gannon than the rest of them, but I'm honored to call Paul a friend. We're not sharing hotels or anything, but when we play together, we smile, we laugh, and we have a good time, and I appreciate that about him, that all of those guys, I am the product of other people pouring into me. I didn't get here on my own, and if I'm going to climb any higher, it's going to be people helping me as well. I'll put in the work, but I got to have people help me. It's almost like a NASCAR driver. I'm the one on the track driving the car, but you don't see the gas man, the crew chief, the lug guys. You don't see all the people helping me. I mean, this is a team effort for sure.
Logan, are you a big NASCAR guy?
Yes. Let's talk about this.
Who's your favorite? Yes, okay. I'm a big racing guy, okay? Drive to Survive got me into Formula One, and I keep just bringing it up on the podcast. If there's an over-under of, am I going to bring it up on the podcast? The juice, it's going to be pretty positive. So first off, do you watch Formula One? Second off, or let's do first off, favorite NASCAR driver team right now. Second off, are we into Formula One at all?
Okay, first, Hendrick Motorsports. I like the Chevy boys. I like Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, Alex Bowman, and who's the 48? Or the 24? William Byron. The four Hendrick drivers, I really like them. I like Rick Hendrick. Kyle Busch, now that he is not driving for Gibbs, I like him. He's with RCR Childress. So, big NASCAR guy. The Harpool house shut down 3 times a year when I was little. Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Daytona's next weekend. We're waiting on this.
Yes, it is.
We're waiting on this Super Bowl, but the real fun starts next week. So no, I've never really been into F1. I appreciate it, but I don't know. I just have never followed it that much. I'll watch the Rolex 24-hour race, but there are so many. I feel like there's so many manufacturers in that too. There's Mercedes, there's BMW. Now Ford is getting back into it. I don't know. I'm just partial to the Cup Series, and I was raised pretty, I don't want to say redneck, but I'm convinced I didn't wear shoes or a shirt till I was like 13. We were in the country. We raced go-karts. We watched NASCAR, and it's still in my blood. So, yeah, I'm counting down the days to Daytona.
No, that's awesome. That's really cool. I feel like when I used to, nerd moment, I used to play fantasy NASCAR with my dad as a child. Kyle Busch was and still is my favorite driver out on the course. Hate Brad Keselowski. Brad Keselowski and Joey Logano are two dudes I cannot stand. Hate those guys. And yeah, I kind of got away from it for a little bit. And then if you haven't watched Drive to Survive, Logan, you absolutely should. It's really, really good on Netflix. It's the Formula One. They kind of have something similar to that for NASCAR now on YouTube. I think it is on like the CW, but who is watching the CW? So like you can get it on YouTube, and it's not that bad either. But yeah, man, Daytona should be a ton of fun. The Clash was pretty fun. It was definitely weird waking up and seeing Kyle Busch was in trouble with the Mexican police a couple of days after that. And I think it's going to be a great season. I think the entertainment value keeps getting better and all that stuff. So I'm excited.
Yeah, one thing to segue this back into disc golf, I've told some people about this. I think their format for playoffs and championship is awesome. And the Disc Golf Pro Tour Championship is that format, but it's in one weekend. Whereas I think if we were to structure it, because our playoff events are, this year they're D-Glow and MVP. I don't know if there's a third one or not. But imagine, and I don't know what courses we would use. We could use D-Glow MVP, Hornets Nest, and then finish at wherever they played last year. I forget the name.
Yeah,
what was the name of that course?
In North Carolina.
It was just on ESPN too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Damn.
I'm drawing a blank. Wherever they played the championship. You have your top 16 in points or world ranking, whatever. You play a week, it's down to 8. Play a week down to 4. Play a week down to 2. Now in NASCAR, it's every 2 weeks, I think, and they'll start with the round of 16. The round of 12, the round of 8, and then in 4, whoever finishes the highest on that final race out of those 4 is your champion, your Cup Series champion. So you have a points champion, and then you have the Cup Series champion. And I think disc golf, if they were to adopt a 5-week-long playoff, now that's a grind, and it's already a long season, so I don't know if that's sustainable, but we already have playoff events. The only difference is our championship is condensed down to one single weekend. And there's been talk, the World Championship has always been a weekend. But what if the World Championship was an elimination process and then the world title is between only 4? Imagine the hype around that one card.
That would be incredible.
That would be so much better. So much better. I mean, literally, that makes more people want to watch. That's why NASCAR has its success with those people coming in. And I think that's where NASCAR is a little bit ahead of Formula One in the fact that Formula One, Max Verstappen is going to win this year's championship. I'm going to tell you that right now. It's minus 105 on FanDuel. Put your house on it because he's going to win the championship. There is nothing, unless Mercedes has figured it out, which they kind of looked like they were at the end of the year.
Red Bull's car could
Max
suck.
Verstappen. They're not going to suck.
They're not good, but
they are not going to suck. It could, right? But it's one of those things where last year Max got out to such a massive lead that halfway through the season, the Formula One season was over. Everyone knew Max was going to win, right? Like there was still 6 races left or something like that, and Max had already been crowned champion. It's not fun to watch a 5, 6, 7, 8 round event on the same weekend where, let's say, for Logan it would be fun, but if Logan's winning by 20 strokes against everybody, except for us and the people cheering for Logan, it's not going to be super exciting to watch. But if you do that elimination process like you're talking about, Logan, that's going to be so much more exciting. You're going to be able to draw more people in. You're going to be able to draw more sponsorships in. I love that idea. I think that's a really solid idea.
And they're already doing it. Like that format is the bracket, or I don't even know if it's a bracket, but it's elimination style in that final day when they had Paul, Rick, Gannon, and Isaac on that final card. That was awesome. So they're already doing it. I've always thought NASCAR's model was pretty cool, and they draw the playoffs out, and then I don't know if you guys remember, but Chastain passing through by doing the wall ride.
Yeah.
You guys remember that last year where he video gamed it against the wall? I mean, that was to transfer through and get to the Final Four. So when you get down to that last, obviously the last lap, or if it were disc golf, you got 3 holes to go and you need 1 stroke to advance through to the next round. You got to go, which, like I said, they have. It's just all in one weekend right now. So maybe it gets drawn out, but maybe our system is good the way it is.
I feel like, I mean, I see what you're saying, but I feel like it could be like over 2 weekends. Have like, instead of like, I don't know how many rounds, I don't remember how many rounds it is, I'm sorry. But if it's 4 rounds, you play two rounds, so the round of 32, the round of 16, and then the next weekend it's the round of 8, and then the round of 4 on Sunday is the final round. I feel like that would be cool because you could build a little bit of hype for the last 8 guys or gals. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Just to add a little bit of suspense. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. I think the Worlds model, there's been a lot of chatter about that. The Worlds model, they want to spread it out, but the Masters in golf is not spread out over multiple weekends. And even Tiger has said, I love Tiger. Yeah. I'm a huge Tiger Woods fan. And he's even said, everybody gets hot for periods of time, and you just hope that a major falls in that time frame for you. And it was Scotty Scheffler last year, won I don't know how many back-to-back-to-back events. And now Jon Rahm's starting off with 2 in the desert, and he's going to charge this weekend at Waste Management Open. He had a decent opening round. He's got a shot. And so, I don't know. You see it both ways. I kind of like Worlds being, this is the moment, show up at the majors. That's the name of the game, and there's a few people that do every single major. There's a few people that rise to the top every time.
Agreed.
What would you say is the Daytona 500 on the Disc Golf Pro Tour?
Vegas, because it kicks it off. That's the opening. Now, they call Daytona the Great American Race, so if we're going on like a vintage stop, probably MVP, because Maple Hill, they've been playing that for years. I mean, ever since MJ hit the gopher, there's a lot of history there. So MVP is pretty notorious. Winthrop, I mean, that might be the Daytona 500. They've been playing that for a long time, but they've also changed that course too. And I don't know how much MVP has changed, but it's tough. Daytona's pretty iconic. It's hard to
absolutely.
Yeah.
Who do you got winning this one?
Man, I don't know. If you look at the last 2 winners, it was Michael McDowell because he was in the right place. He ran a great race, but he was in the right place at the right time. And then Austin Cindric last year, kind of the same thing. Whoever doesn't wreck. If you have a decent car and you don't get caught in what they call the big one that wads up 20 of the 40-car field, you got a good shot. So it's what I always say to my dad and my brother. They're fans too. It's like, man, you got to stay healthy for 500 miles and I try to tell people this. I hate arguing why NASCAR is cool to people. 40 cars going 200 to 205 miles an hour, inches from each other for 500 miles. Unless you've, like, I went to a race at the Kansas Speedway last year, and if you've never been and you can go. Because when we were on the infield, we did the garage walk and everything, and I had gun muffs, but I didn't have them on. And when the green flag dropped and all 40 of those cars gunned it, my ears bottomed out. Like, it was just a rattle in my ears, and you feel it. Your whole body is vibrating. And I'm just thinking, what are the guys in the car feeling right now? If I'm feeling this here, what are those guys feeling? It's insane. I understand how it could look boring on TV, but my goodness, if you can go to a race, go, because it's amazing.
Yeah, I hate the argument that people say
Left turn.
disc golfers, but NASCAR drivers, Formula One drivers, all they do is like going on a left turn. They're not athletes, bro. I drive next to a car that's like 7 feet away from me, and I am aggro. I am pissed off. You're too close to me. They, like you said, they're literally inches. They are touching each other. They are doing all these different kinds of things, and you have to stay mentally focused. I mean, have you ever gone like 90 and you're kind of tripping on the highway because you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going so fast right now. These dudes are going double that. And they have to be technical, and there's someone literally right on him. Like, all of that is so difficult. And that's funny that you said that about the Kansas Speedway. My wife and I, one of the first sporting events that we went to was the Kansas Speedway for a race like 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. And my little naive self was like, I don't need any, ear protection. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. We're sitting up time, no big deal. I couldn't hear for weeks because it was so loud, and it would be calm, and then the pack would go by again. I was like, oh, I literally cannot hear anything. And like you said, if you've never been to a race, when they do a restart, there's no sound in this world like that. It is absolutely insane.
Oh. Yeah, and pit road speed, like pit road on TV looks like they're going in a school zone. Pit road's like 50. We were standing there when they did the pass by to check, because they don't have speedometers either. They don't have speedometers or gas gauges. So when you understand that, there's a crew chief calculating, we got a headwind on the back stretch. We've been driving hard. We probably need to stop for gas. We might be able to make it. Who knows? So they're watching RPMs, knowing how the car's set up, guessing if they're speeding or not on pit road. And then at Talladega or Kansas, it's wide open. But yeah, I could go on with NASCAR all night. Trust me on that one.
Sweet.
I'm just glad that I finally have gotten another person on this podcast who we can talk racing with, Trenton, because I feel like I try to bring this stuff up to people and they just kind of give me this like, yeah, absolutely, that's cool. I think that it's time for me to get out of here. So that was really good. One last question. I'm bringing the racing stuff in one more time. I have been a lot into Formula One lately, so I'm not exactly sure if NASCAR does something like this. But in Formula One, they have the Manufacturers' Championship also, right? Because there's two. So there's Red Bull, there's 2 drivers. Mercedes has 2 drivers. Ferrari has 2 drivers. Down the list, there's 10 teams. And those 2 drivers compete to get points, just as they are in the individual. But, you add them together, that's how you get your manufacturer who wins. Do you see any value in adding a system like that to disc golf? Like, let's take Team Dynamic Discs. You have the team of Dynamic Disc guys. You've got the Latitude 64. You've got Discraft, Innova, Prodigy, all these different manufacturers. And let's say the top 50 on each weekend get points. Would there be, do you think, could that add any kind of excitement? Could that add some drama? Maybe more to play for? Like, hey, the teams at the end of the year who finish X, 1, 2, 3 down the line get a bonus. The players get bonuses for those kinds of things. I just feel like that's something that could add a little bit more to the tour, but I don't know if that's trying to do too much.
That could be cool. I've honestly never thought of that before. The first thing that comes to mind is that some teams are a whole lot bigger than others. And so it's, in NASCAR, there's 4 drivers here, 4 there, and maybe 2 on the smaller teams. So it's pretty even, but you have some teams that are much, much, much bigger versus there would be some that really wouldn't have a chance. If you take like a Lone Star last year, probably didn't have much of a chance. Chandler would have had to put everybody on his back. I don't even know who else they had on that squad. This year they'd have a chance. But I don't know. That's interesting. I think it could happen. It'd be interesting to know, there's more and more NDAs in people's contracts where they can't talk about, but it'd be interesting to know what's in there about team bonuses and things like that, because I'm sure they exist. But I don't know. In terms of, we have the Champions Cup. It would be interesting if they're maybe not a major, but test out a Pro Tour event where it was teams by manufacturer. That could be fun. But then you'd have to choose your top 4 men and top 3 women or something like that to play. 4 and 4,
Yeah.
4 men, 4 women, and they throw down. So that would be interesting.
That would work. Or I think the way that I had it, I mean, maybe you declare like these 10 players can earn points towards this or something like that. Whatever it want to be. But I do like that 4 and 4, and they just kind of do a tournament like that. That could be really good as well. I don't know. I just think at the end of the day, it gives the fans something else to watch. It gives the players potentially something else to play for. Let's say you're chilling in 35th, and there's really no difference between 35th and 30th payout wise. Maybe a couple $100 here, but maybe that gets your team ahead of the other team, and then maybe that can lead to more down the line. And I don't know, just a thought that I think down the future could make disc golf a little bit more interesting to watch. I know I would be tapped in a lot more to what's going on ladder down the cards. We got a press release today from the Disc Golf Pro Tour that there's going to be a lot more live action, and it looks as though they're going to be covering a lot more than just like the main lead card, which I think is good for the sport, because the more people we can get on camera and the more of a broadcast there is, I think that's going to do wonders for the sport and the players playing it. But that's all I got. This has been an amazing podcast, Logan. Thank you so much for joining us once again. Where can people continue to follow you and connect and learn more about your journey?
Mainly on Instagram and Facebook. Those are the 2 I'm most active. I don't have Twitter. That was a lot of drama the last time I looked at it. So I read a little bit, but I don't tweet, so there's no point to having it. So Facebook and Instagram. Mainly Instagram is the best way to get a hold of me. Everything on Facebook is through Instagram anyway. So just at Logan Harpool. YouTube has kind of taken a back seat. I'm just focused on playing right now and being the best I can be. I do want to vlog a little bit, but I don't know. Now that I'm settled into touring, I might do it a little bit more, but I'm still focused on getting there, practicing playing, and vlogging is a whole nother animal that I don't know that I have the time or energy for. So, yep, Instagram is the best way, and I'm still getting form reviews. If you send it now, it's going to be a pretty solid wait before you get it back, because there's still some in the queue, and I'm not jumping to the newest one. So if you have sent me one and you haven't got yours yet, I'm sorry. Please be patient. There were a ton. I am going to get back to everybody, I promise.
Heck yeah. Well, thanks a lot for coming on, and everybody make sure you go check out Logan Harpool on all the socials that he just mentioned, and we will see you on the next one.